Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of Explain This. As I always am, with the star of the show, Robin Riddle. Robin, how's it going?
Good. How are you?
I'm excited about this show. I'm excited about this topic, and because it's something that I deal with, you deal with, everyone deals with, especially around the winter season.
Yeah.
People hear about antibiotics. So there's two sides to antibiotics. One is they can really help you get over a sickness quickly. The other thing is it can wipe out your gut. And I know people are hearing about that, so it's making them more wary of taking antibiotics. And I would just love if you could explain antibiotics in the gut and kind of how you approach it, understanding those two sides.
Yeah, absolutely. So as we know, as we talked about in old videos, I'm kind of the gut queen.
Yes.
As well as the peptide queen. There's lots of things that I love. But gut health is a really big deal for me.
Yep.
And so that's a conversation that I have very often with people when it comes to antibiotics. Mm-hmm. So in research, they have found that you have about 100 trillion different bacteria in the gut. 100 trillion bacteria. A round of antibiotics can cut that down to 1/10 of that.
So 100 trillion what in the gut?
Bacteria.
100 trillion bacteria, and antibiotic wipes out a lot
of it. 90% of it.
Got it. Okay.
It's worse with back-to-back antibiotics. So you take one, I didn't get better. Let me take another one. I need to take another one. Broad-spectrum antibiotics, because as the name says, broad-spectrum, they hit a lot of stuff.
Yep.
There are certain types of antibiotics that are more focused that aren't quite as bad. But in general, most antibiotics are going to have a pretty significant impact on the gut.
Okay.
So why is this important? Well, first of all, so in early childhood and teenagers, the more antibiotics that you take through that stage of development, you increase risk for developing things like ADHD, anxiety, depression, IBS, IBD. There's a lot of conditions that can come up because of this, and they are establishing this link now.
Interesting.
Yeah. So
the link being I need that, like my body needs it.
The link being that kid had a dose of antibiotics every month for ear infections, now that kid has ADHD.
Okay, got it.
For adults, it can cause all kinds of gut issues for sure. 70% of your body's immune system is in the gut. So if we are wiping out your bacteria with an antibiotic that's supposed to make you better, we're actually wiping out your immune system too.
It's crazy.
It is.
Yeah.
It is. And one antibiotic does not mean that your gut will never recover. Chronic antibiotic use is definitely way worse. So when I talk about antibiotics with patients, the first question is, do you really need it? Or is it that you are inconvenienced because you've had the sniffles for a couple of days and you're wanting to feel better fast, and so you're asking for a Z-Pak every time you get the sniffles? We need to make sure you actually need it. And for more reasons than just the gut. You've got antibiotic resistance. That's how all these strains come up that we're having to use these crazy strong antibiotics for. So making sure it's actually a bacterial infection that an antibiotic's going to work on. Antibiotics don't work on viruses.
Got it. Okay. Got
it. The general cold, flu, antibiotics don't help. Now, a caveat to that, we do treat COVID differently. We do always put an antibiotic on board with COVID, along with the antiviral that we're using, but that's a different situation. We're trying to prevent secondary bacterial infections. That's a much bigger deal. I use antibiotics every single time for that.
Got it.
That's a different thing.
Yeah, it seems like using an antibiotic to stop something from getting worse has always been my mentality in terms of whenever I got on one.
Yeah.
Like, okay, I'm preventing this from getting worse. But at the same time, I understand, I don't want to get in a habit of doing that.
Right. You don't want to take an antibiotic just for every little thing.
Yeah.
Chronic antibiotic use. So a very common thing that I've seen is going on antibiotics for months on end for acne. And they do this a lot in teenagers and young people, 20s, to help clear up acne. But generally, it's anywhere from 30 days to 3 months straight of low-dose antibiotics.
And that's why they feel sick on that, right?
Yeah, it's destroying your gut. That is like an atomic bomb in the gut. It's absolutely destroying things. So antibiotics are a very useful tool.
And you use them.
Absolutely. I
Right.
use them. I am not against antibiotics. There are many situations where I do use them. I always caution patients, again, make sure that you need it. But then if we're going to do antibiotics, what do we do along with that to help protect your body and help restore everything that we've just killed off?
Okay.
Because we've killed everything. So helping to restore, of course, using probiotics. So we're getting that good bacteria back in there. Why is that good bacteria important? Because again, 70% of your immune system comes from the gut. So that's going to help fight off any of the bad bacteria, helps fight off yeast, things like that that are really going to start to cause issues. So keep that immune system really good and strong.
Okay.
Probiotic, getting the good bacteria back in there. Prebiotics, feeding the good bacteria. And prebiotics can come through food. So diet is really important when you're on antibiotics and right after you come off of them.
Okay.
Consuming lots of good, healthy prebiotic foods. So fruits, vegetables, fibers, grains, kombucha, fermented foods, things like that that are really good for helping to restore the balance of the gut are going to be important as well.
Okay.
You can take probiotics while you're taking an antibiotic, and I generally advise all of my patients to do that. You just have to space it.
Okay.
So if you have an antibiotic dose with breakfast and dinner, you take your probiotic at lunch or at bedtime. You want at least a 3-hour space between your antibiotics and your probiotics.
Interesting.
That way, that gives the probiotics a chance to live for a little while before you bomb them again. And then increasing that probiotic dose and continuing it for a while after you have finished the antibiotics.
So is there a repair process? So say I finish, because I've also heard a big deal is like finishing the antibiotic. You want to finish the
Absolutely.
antibiotic.
Yeah.
And then after you finish it, is there like a, where you come in and like repair things? Is there like a certain protocol you like, or is it just probiotics and prebiotics?
I like to, generally I like to tell people, bump your probiotic dose up afterwards. Increase your probiotic and prebiotic foods. Eat lots of yogurt, drink kombucha, things like that.
Interesting.
Generally about a month, and then you can go back to your normal probiotic use, which in general, I encourage everybody to take probiotics. They're great for your gut.
Yes.
But the higher dosing for, a couple weeks to a month after you've done your antibiotics to get your body back on board and really help keep things healthy.
Out of curiosity, like how would somebody and their provider kind of judge whether or not it is a time they need to go on an antibiotic? Do you have is that, I know it's so
broad.
Unique.
If you have a dog bite and it's bright red, we're going to do antibiotics. If you have clear nasal drainage that you've had for 2 days and you have the sniffles, I am not going to give you antibiotics.
Totally.
If you have copious green drainage that you've had for 2 weeks, you probably needed an antibiotic a week ago.
Totally.
Of course, I have the patients that just don't want antibiotics, and so there are natural things that I always talk about. But in general, if I feel that it's viral or I feel it's not been long enough to know that it's bacterial, I'm talking about take your allergy medicine, take your decongestant, do your saline rinses, all of those things, and wait it out.
Interesting.
So again, just make sure you really need it before you take it, because you've got to think about the repercussions it's having through the rest of the body.
Well, what you just said, I think, clears up a lot, because that really explains, when it's okay, when it's not okay, when you need it and when you don't. So guys, rewind the video, watch it back before you take an antibiotic. They aren't bad. They're great, but there's also overuse of them. So just be careful and follow whatever Robin just told you guys in this Explain This video. Robin, I appreciate you.
Absolutely.
Another episode of Explain This in the books, guys. You name it, we explain it. We'll be back next time. See y'all then.
Don't go